Welcome to this presentation on chain of custody in the forest sector. This presentation is part of a series developed by NEPCon under a project called Increasing Capacity of CSOs and SMEs to Implement FLEGT requirements. The project aims at increasing the capacity of civil society organizations and small to medium-sized enterprises to implement FLEGT requirements. The project is funded by the European Union and implemented by NEPCon and SFMI, the Sustainable Forest Management Institute in Viet Nam. This presentation will begin by answering the important questions: what is chain of custody and why is it important? The aim will then be to explore the role that chain of custody plays in the trade of forest products worldwide. This will involve looking at the different chain of custody models used to trace material with and between organizations in a supply chain and focus on what are called critical control points. That will then lead to an exploration of chain of custody certification in the forest sector and a look at how chain of custody is dealt with in negotiations for voluntary partnership agreements and a country's timber legality assurance system. So getting underway, what is chain of custody? When discussing supply chains, chain of custody refers to all steps within a supply chain that take possession of a particular product. In the supply chain of a forest product, this includes forest managers, manufacturers, exporters, traders, and importers. On the slide, we have an example supply chain with 4 steps in it, from the forest to the sawmill, to a furniture maker, and then finally to a distributor. Within the forest and timber sector, the term chain of custody has most often been used to refer to chain of custody control systems that are implemented to support forest management certification and allow claims to be made about the certified source of a forest product. These claims relate to the management of the forest that the products come from, that the forest either has sustainable forest management or legality certification. Chain of custody certification provides a link between a forest and the claim about the management of the forest that a consumer can see on a final product. Chain of custody consists of a system in operation to enable this, but it also needs to consist of evidence of the implementation of that system. Here we look at how the 2 main forest certification schemes refer to chain of custody. FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, refers to chain of custody as the path taken by materials from the forest to the consumer, including each stage of processing, transformation, manufacturing, storage, and transport, where progress to the next stage of the supply chain involves a change of ownership. PEFC, the Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification, describes chain of custody as the process of handling of information on the origin of forest-based products, which allows the organization to make accurate and verifiable claims on the content of certified material. The importance of supply chain management and chain of custody comes from the desire to know more about the source of forest products in the marketplace. The purpose of controlling this chain of custody is therefore to provide evidence that a product originates from a particular source. For this to occur, the products must be able to be traced through the supply chain. It can be difficult to know the source of a product because of the complexity of many supply chains, but this just highlights the need for chain of custody. Efforts must be made to trace products through the chain and ensure they are not mixed or substituted with other unwanted products. In order to trace material through the supply chain, there are a number of different chain of custody models. One of these is called identity preservation, and this involves tracing products from their geographical origin, the country, region, or forest that they came from. Throughout the supply chain, the product is kept separate from the products of other geographic origins so that the origin can always be known. Another model is referred to as product segregation. While segregation is also used as part of identity preservation, the term segregation is most often used to refer to keeping products produced according to the same standard, segregated from products that haven't been. Such products may not be traced back to a common source, but they will carry a claim related to how they have been produced, be it sustainable or legal or something else. It is a way to know that an entire product contains 100% sustainable or legal material. This type of chain of custody is common among certification schemes of the forest sector, but also of others such as coffee, cocoa, and seafood. Also common in chain of custody systems of certification schemes is the mass balance system. Where it is difficult or perhaps even impossible to segregate materials at all times, mass balance systems introduce some flexibility to chain of custody. Mass balance systems allow not only mixing of material produced according to a common standard from different sources, but it also allows mixing with material that hasn't been certified or verified to the same standard. For example, in the case of sustainable forest management certification, material from certified forests can be mixed with material from non-certified forests. As the products move through the supply chain, accounts are kept for the volume ratios to ensure that the amount of certified products that are produced and enter the supply chain equals the amount or volume ratios of certified products sold to consumers. Only a certain percentage of the material in the supply chain can be sold with a claim, and only a portion of this material is certified. Finally, we have the book and claim model. This model is very different from the others in that there is no physical traceability of material through the supply chain. Instead, certified production is driven by demand through the sale and purchase of certificates or credits. Producers of certified material can sell certificates or credits for the right to claim sustainable sourcing on a separate online market. A retailer can purchase these, allowing it to make on-product claims about supporting sustainable production. While there are a number of models, what is used in a supply chain in any given situation may combine a number of these. What is really important, however, particularly when we are concerned about forest legality and compliance with illegal logging legislation like the EU timber regulation, is that material is traceable to its origin. The identity preservation model that was discussed is therefore very important and needs to feature in any system that is used. The book and claim model is completely unsuitable as there is no direct link between a particular product and its origin. When we use the word traceability, we refer to the ability to trace a product through all stages of processing, transformation, manufacturing, and distribution. Traceability applies to both directions in the supply chain. Maintaining control of the chain of custody and preserving information on the origin of material as it passes through the supply chain from its origin to final product allows that product to be traced back to its origin from any point in the supply chain. There are two main components of controlling the supply chain and tracing material through it. One is the control of material within an organization. With this, we are concerned about linking the inputs of the organization with its outputs. The other is the control of material between organizations. Here, we want to know that material being sold from one organization keeps its relevant information. The claim or information associated with particular material is passed on with the material and maintained from one organization to the next. How easy it is to do this in practice very much depends on the complexity of the supply chain. Some supply chains may be very simple, with one original origin of the material and one player or actor at each point in the supply chain where the material is bought, sold, and possibly processed. Other supply chains may be much more complex, with several players at each stage. Traceability is much more difficult in these situations because not only is a lot more information needed, but there are a lot more chances for mixing or substitution of material. It becomes harder and harder to trace which organizations the material is being bought from and sold to, and with more processes going on, there is a greater risk of something going wrong. We'll now look at one component of traceability, chain of custody within an organization. At every stage of the supply chain, be it forest management, processing, or trading, uncontrolled mixing of material must be prevented by segregating material, ensuring that material is always identifiable, and maintaining documentation on all relevant activities. Breaking such a system down, elements are needed for controlling the sourcing of products, controlling production processes, controlling sales and dispatch, and controlling the use of claims and labeling. We will now look at segregation, identification, and documentation separately. Starting with segregation, verified legal or certified material needs to be kept segregated from material that is not verified or certified. Segregation means setting something or things apart from the rest or from each other, like to isolate or divide. Material with different claims or different origins needs to be kept physically separate from other material. This can be done in both time and space. With space, different groups of material can be held or owned at the same time, but kept physically separate in different areas. For example, a log yard can have different sections where different groups of material are kept. Material can also be separated by time, with batches of different material groups being owned, held, or processed, etc., at different times. A log yard may hold some certified material before transporting it away, and then taking non-certified logs and later transporting those. When material is segregated, it is of course very important to be able to identify the material. There are a variety of ways that material can be identified, for example with particular marks that may involve painting the material with different colors or attaching labels. More technical ways of identifying material include the use of barcodes and other identification codes. Packaged material may also be easily identified by using different types of packaging. Finally, documentation is very important. There needs to be a record of the material or products coming in under the ownership or custody of an organization and going out from that organization. Records of operations are also needed to know what is being done with material while it is under the possession of the organization. Of course, documentation also needs to include information about the material, namely its origin. There needs to be purchase and sales records, for example, invoices, and there also needs to be records of the general chain of custody systems and procedures used by an organization. To maintain traceability between organizations, claims and information associated with products needs to be linked through each change of ownership of those products. Organizations purchasing material need to ensure they receive proof of origin and verification of legality or chain of custody certificate for specific products and invoices that identify the products. In turn, the sellers must ensure that sufficient proof is provided and that the invoice and delivery notes identify the products. Ensuring traceability between organizations also requires the comparison of quantities recorded as bought and sold by different organizations. For example, on this slide we have one organization, represented by the letter A, selling material to another organization, represented by the letter B. Organization B is in turn selling material to Organization C. The quantity recorded as sold by Organization A to Organization B must be the same as what Organization B records as bought from Organization A. The same then applies to the records for the sale and purchase between Organizations B and C. Moving on, key to managing any chain of custody system and ensuring traceability of material is managing critical control points. Critical control points are stages in the supply chain where uncertified material or uncontrolled material could enter the supply chain through simple addition or through substitution of certified or controlled material. In any supply chain, it is important that critical control points are identified and that a method to control them is established. Examples of common critical control points are the point at which products are received by an organization, storage areas, and production lines, particularly those that involve material from different sources. To manage or control critical control points, the same methods normally used to maintain traceability need to be employed. Therefore, different techniques and combinations of techniques to identify, segregate, and document material need to be used. Concrete examples include the use of separate storage areas for material from different origins, the use of separate production lines, or managing production in different batches. Special attention may need to be paid to using clear identifying marks and labels and using unique codes. Attention will also likely need to be paid to not only maintaining records, but conducting checks on them, including for reconciling quantities as they are processed using conversion factors. For the next part of this presentation, we will look at chain of custody certification. Credible chain of custody certification supports the truthfulness of claims and labels made on products. Chain of custody certification has been quite popular in the forest sector. It has been used to provide the link between certified forests and the products derived from them, so that the products can be sold with claims and corresponding labels about the management and certification of the forests they come from. It's therefore a very useful tool to take information to consumers, allowing them, as well as companies in the supply chain, the opportunity to prefer and choose products that have been produced in a responsible way. The idea is that this can create a competitive advantage for such products based on market demand. Possible benefits of chain of custody certification include improved market share and access to markets, recognition of companies using certified products as market leaders, a demonstrated commitment to responsible forestry, benefits for the forests themselves, verification of the sources, improved relationship between companies, and a long-term supply of quality forest products. There are specific rules for which organizations in the supply chain that chain of custody certification shall apply to. Basically, all organizations in the supply chain that have legal ownership of certified products and perform one or more of the following activities require certification for a product to continue to carry a claim and eventually be labeled for the final consumer. The activities are: 1. Pass on the certification claim to subsequent customers through sales and delivery documents. Apply the certification label on product, and process or transform certified products, for example, manufacturing, repackaging, relabeling, and adding other forest-based components to the product. Organizations that don't perform one of those activities and therefore don't need chain of custody certification include retailers that sell products to the end users of those products, the end users themselves, be they organizations or individuals, and organizations that provide services to certified organizations without taking legal ownership of the certified products. This includes agents arranging the trade of certified products, logistics companies that transport or temporarily store certified products, and contractors operating under an outsourcing agreement. Three main models or methodologies are used by the main forest chain of custody certification schemes. By far, the simplest of these is the transfer or segregation model that just requires certified and non-certified material to be kept separate by time or space. When this is done, the claim that came with the input material is simply transferred to the output. More complex are the percentage and credit-based claims systems. These are variations of the mass balance method discussed near the beginning of the presentation. They involve the mixing of certified and non-certified material to have outputs that are mixed in terms of content. Not just any non-certified material can be mixed, however. There are rules on what can be mixed, so that raises an additional issue of determining those rules. The FSC scheme sets rules for what is termed controlled wood, and the PEFC scheme has rules for non-controversial sources. To begin demonstrating the different methodologies, we'll use an example of a certified sawmill receiving different types of material. As I said on the previous slide, the transfer system or segregation system is the most straightforward. As the name suggests, certified material is simply kept segregated from non-certified material in all processing and transport processes. This is done so that the certified claim is transferred from the input to the output of that certified material. Moving on, percentage systems have a minimum percentage threshold for the proportion of material before the output material can have a claim. Above that threshold, all products can be labeled. This is only the case, however, if the non-certified inputs also meet some minimum requirements, and this is the case for both the FSC and PEFC schemes. The percentage threshold used in the schemes is 70%. The FSC scheme has a specific label for use when material is not 100% certified, called the mix label, while the PEFC scheme doesn't have a specific label. So, to demonstrate again in a simple way, we will consider the same certified sawmill, but this time it is sourcing certified material, non-certified material that meets minimum requirements, and other material. Again, the sawmill is using a segregation system to keep the other non-certified material completely separate. So our focus is on the top two inputs. Of the material that will have a certification claim applied to the final product, at least 70% needs to be certified, and the rest will be comprised by non-certified material that meets the minimum requirements for mixing. This material can be mixed in the sawmill, and the resulting products will be able to be labeled or carry a claim. In the FSC system, the claim would be FSC mix. The final system is volume credit. This system is more complex as there is no direct link between the certified inputs and the output that carries a claim or label. Certified input is mixed with other material, and only a certain proportion of the output, which itself only contains a portion of certified or verified material, can be sold with a claim. The volume of certified timber relates to the volume of output that can be labeled. This only works when any losses of material during the process are accounted for. Conversion factors need to be applied so that the credit outputs do truly match the certified inputs. Looking again at the certified sawmill, it receives certified material, non-certified material that meets minimum requirements for mixing, and other non-certified material. Also again, it keeps the other non-certified material separated from the rest of the production. The sawmill mixes all material eligible for labeling, recording all volumes. It is only allowed to label a portion of the final products that relates to the volume of the certified material that they contain. If instead of a sawmill we were looking at a trader, the volume of certified products would be the same as the volume that the trader bought. However, any stage of processing will lose some of the material during the process, so a conversion factor needs to be applied that reflects the actual volume that makes it to the final product. In our sawmill case, it may be that only 50% of the input material, logs, is turned into sawn wood, so the final volume of material that can be labeled is only half of the input volume. That takes us to the end of the discussion of chain of custody certification, and we'll now look at how chain of custody is dealt with in voluntary partnership agreement processes. As we went through in the presentation on the EU FLEGT action plan, the main reason for negotiating a voluntary partnership agreement is the development of a timber legality assurance system, which once operational will allow the issuance of FLEGT licenses. Shipments with a FLEGT license are considered to automatically comply with the EU timber regulation. A timber legality assurance system, or TLAS, has 5 core elements. These are a definition of legality, control of the supply chain, a verification system which checks compliance with laws and that supply chains are being effectively controlled, the issuance of FLEGT licenses, and independent monitoring of the entire system. Here we are concerned with the control of the supply chain. Within the control of the supply chain component, the TLAS needs to have rules for how all organizations in the supply chain trace material that is verified as legal in the system and ensure that material that isn't verified legal doesn't substitute or get mixed with it. Importantly, there needs to be evidence that all timber within the system is legal and can be traced to a known legal origin. The systems will need to contain what we discussed earlier about how chain of custody systems and traceability will be maintained. That is, there will need to be requirements for organizations to identify verified legal timber and maintain systems to keep it segregated from non-verified products. These will always need to be able to be identified. Documentation is required for all processes in general, but also to reconcile information within and between organizations. The verification systems within the TLAS must ensure that such requirements are followed and that records within and between organizations match up. Having a look at the TLAS in Indonesia, like all systems, the whole supply chain must be controlled and documented, including maintaining information on the origin of material, and segregation systems need to exist to keep verified and non-verified timber from different sources separate. Companies must record whether products are TLAS verified and apply appropriate systems to segregate between timber and timber products from verified sources from timber and timber products from other sources. Records distinguishing these sources must be maintained and made available to forestry officials that carry out tests between and within the nodes of the supply chain. For this purpose, a central database has been set up to contain all relevant data. A number of accredited conformity assessment bodies audit the supply chain controls of timber producers, traders, processors, and exporters, as well as, of course, their compliance with relevant laws. They also can reconcile the data between organizations in a supply chain to ensure that no unverified timber has entered it. Data must be reconciled before a FLEGT license can be issued to an exporter. This final slide of the presentation provides a quick comparison of supply chain control from the perspective of certification schemes versus timber legality assurance systems that are products of voluntary partnership agreements. This comparison focuses on the purpose of each scheme or system, whether using and following them is voluntary or not, and who develops the requirements. Beginning with the purpose, the forest certification schemes use chain of custody certification to demonstrate to consumers that products come from certified forests. Timber legality assurance systems, however, exist to identify, monitor, and license legally produced timber to ensure that only legal timber is exported to the European Union. Moving on, FSC, PEFC, and other certification schemes are voluntary. Companies can choose to be certified if they would like to be able to pass on certification claims and label certified products. A TLAS, on the other hand, once a VPA is signed and the TLAS is operational, is not voluntary. It becomes mandatory by law and applies to all organizations in the timber supply chain in a VPA country. Finally, looking at who owns and develops the chain of custody rules, certification standards are developed by international NGOs and their members and/or stakeholders. In contrast, rules for controlling the supply chain in a TLAS are developed by the country that it will apply to. The whole TLAS is developed by the VPA partner country with cooperation from civil society and private sector stakeholders. The VPA is negotiated and eventually agreed with the EU before it is signed by both parties. Bringing this presentation to a close, I'd like to thank you for watching. I hope it's been interesting and useful to you.